اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وإذ قال لقمان لابنه وهو يعظه يا بني لا تشرك بالله إن الشرك لظلم عظيم. ووصينا الإنسان بوالديه حملته أمه وهنا على وهن وفصاله في عامين أن اشكر لي ولوالديك إلي المصير. وإن جاهداك على أن تشرك بما ليس لك به علم فلا تطعهما وصاحبهما في الدنيا معروفا في الدنيا معروفا واتبع سبيل من أناب إلي ثم إلي مرجعكم فأنبئكم بما كنتم تعملون. صدق الله العلي العظيم.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أحسنتم جزاكم الله. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. Let's begin with the salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Welcome to class number 7. Jazakumullah. May Allah reward you for taking the effort, especially in the heat, to inshallah learn from the teachings of the Quran and the Ahlul Bayt alayhim assalam, and welcome to our online participants as well. In terms of the spiritual reminder, so the verses that were so beautifully read, they had to do with the importance of being thankful to our parents. So it's a story that I came across of one of our great scholars from recent times, Allamat wa Tabai rahmatullahi alayh, the great mufassir of the Quran, the great scholar. He was known for his mentoring of individuals and guiding them towards the path of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. One of his best students, who himself was a teacher for many, was Marhum Ayatollah Sa'adat Parvar. Ayatollah Sa'adat Parvar said that two things. One thing he said is that when his mother left this world, when his mother passed away, he said that the wasita, the medium between me and Allah, has left this world. Meaning that his mother was so important for him. Like, she played such a role in terms of bringing him to Allah. She was so reflective of Allah's divine attributes that for him, like, it was something that, he felt that loss of connection. And sometimes when we wonder, why is it that the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, when you look at their stories, why were they so saddened when their family members would leave, like they would die or they become martyrs? Like, for example, you look at what happened in Karbala, right? Why were they so affected by it? It's more than just the emotional loss of a great, companion, a great son, a great brother. It's because these individuals were such an excellent character that they were reflections of Allah's divine attributes. And so when they were not there, that channel that this person had to remember Allah, to see Allah reflected, that's something that went away. Another story from his life, it's that one time he was asleep, and then in his dream his father came to him, his father who had passed away. And his father looks at him and kind of is a little bit upset. He says that, why didn't you do that thing that you normally do for us? So when he woke up, he realized that he was in the habit of performing some act, some mustahab act, and he would regularly dedicate it to his marhums, like his father, his mother, like the other members of his family. And for some reason he had forgot to do it at that time. So, because he was a special individual, right? So immediately, his family members are complaining, like, okay, why did you forget? So it's just a reminder for us that, those of us who might have parents or other family members who have passed away, grandparents, it's always important to keep up, on a regular basis, those good acts, and they do help them. And if we have parents, family members who are alive, then making sure to keep up that connection with them and serving them and helping them, inshallah. Okay, so we have our timeline, which everyone, inshallah, is familiar with. Those of you who are new, we do have a Google Classroom set up. You can join through the website, you can join through the app. The app is called Google Classroom. You put in the code and you get to see all the class notes for the previous 6 weeks and this one as well. You get to get weekly homework, and who doesn't like doing homework, right? So, alhamdulillah. All right. We have 8 classes in total. We've gone through 7 of them. The next 2 weeks, we're going to be off because we have programs here at SABA for different occasions that are coming up. This is going to be a good time for those of you who would like to catch up on your homework. You can catch up on it. And we'll be all ready for the last class, inshallah, 2 weeks from now, on the 12th of July. Let's see. In terms of our timeline, so I had a much more ambitious timeline. When I first started, I was like, okay, we're going to get through all these topics, and then when I started working through them, I realized that even though the concept may be easy to talk about, oh, love, yeah, we need to love our children. Respect, yeah, we need to respect our children. But when you get into the application of it, there's a lot to discuss. And I think that the process of going a little bit slower, but trying to get into a little bit more detail, looking at practical applications, reflecting on the homework now has become part of the class, meaning that your response to the homework have become part of the curriculum that we're using to reflect on these topics, which is wonderful. So that's been something that we weren't anticipating. So as a result, we've slowed down in terms of the ambitious goals that we had set out when we first started, which means that inshallah we will have a lot of content to cover for the next semester of this course, that inshallah will happen sometime after the 10, 12 days of Muharram, maybe likely after Arba'in, but let's see, inshallah. Okay, so we're going to start out by just reviewing a few select answers from homework number 5. MashaAllah, all of them were great, and I really appreciated all your efforts. Just wanted to highlight a few because I thought they would be particularly suitable for our class environment. So what do you feel is or are the most effective techniques to demonstrate love to a child? One of you said, call their name respectfully. In the Quran, when the great Luqman was speaking to his son, it says, Ya bunayya, which is also the verses that we just read right now. So this is a beautiful reminder that the Quran teaches us this, that when you're speaking to your child, use terms of endearment. If you, in your language, if you have one of them, then preserve it. Like, unfortunately, in English, like, you know, the use of the word dear or other, maybe it's not so common, or like honey or sweetie, or I don't know, maybe for some people it comes naturally. If it does, that's awesome, please use it. If you're starting out, then maybe you can try using it and it'll come naturally. In other languages, it's very common, you know, and that's something that's beautiful about being able to, you know, some of the things that sometimes we lose when we sacrifice those languages. Kids are different and each have a different love language and personality. Some might see gifts as displays of affection, some attention, spending quality time. Some may like to cuddle, etc. What do you guys think about this one, the second point here? Do you agree with this one, that if you basically, you'd find out your kid's love language and then you use that to show love to them? Yeah.
So I think that is true in a sense, but also like it can take time to find your child's love language. I mean, as a parent, I mean, even though I am not a parent, so I don't have experience in that, but as someone who was a daughter and who had parents growing up, I feel like sometimes the kids might take advantage of that because they're saying like displays like giving gifts. Like if the child knows that, then they're gonna like, you know, act in a way or want to get something out of it, out of their parents. So it is true, but I guess it could have some negative effects if that's correct.
All right. Thank you. So that's great. One of the things that came to mind when I was reflecting on this was that for sure, like, we need to understand our child's like personality, what makes them unique, what do they like. And that's something that, inshallah, I hope to talk about more in the next semester. However, just because we know that, let's say, one child responds really well to like hugs and kisses and cuddling and whatnot, I mean, when they're younger, obviously, and another one doesn't necessarily show that, doesn't mean that we shouldn't do it for the other child. Because some of these things are just universal, right? They're highlighted in the traditions of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim wassalam. It's something which is really emphasized. So, you know, there's no really, I mean, like, let's say one child visibly reacts well when we smile at them and we say salam to them. The other one doesn't. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't smile at the other one, right? In fact, it would be problematic. In fact, there are some personality types that are such that they won't show outwardly when they appreciate what's being done to them. It just doesn't come natural to them. It's going to take them some years before they develop those skills because it's not natural. So, you know, that's where we really have to realize, no, this child does need it. Everyone needs to be hugged, like we talked about, like, you know, in the previous classes. Everyone needs that physical affection. So these things we're talking about are universal, even though, of course, understanding, you know, our child does help. Okay, it's easy for the child to pick up on when you are just going through the motions and when you really want to help or be there for them. That was a really good point about the intentionality, like the being present when we're with them. Spending quality time with them and try to think and play as I am at his or her level. Their problem might seem mundane, but for them it is not. So this student was referring to, you know, this is a principle that we have from the Ahlul Bayt alayhim wassalam, that if you have, there's a hadith from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that if you have a child, fatasabu, go and be like a sabi, like be like a child with them. And that's a way of showing love to them because you're coming down to their level. Okay, giving them your time as they prepare to sleep. That's something which it seems like it's a special time in the day when children really appreciate the company of their parents. And while we can hold on to that, while they enjoy that, we should preserve that. And there's a lot that can be done at that time in terms of helping them reflect on the day, prepare for the next day, making dua, telling them useful stories, like Luqman, you know, speaking to his son, you know, and teaching them in that manner. Okay, when is it challenging to demonstrate love to a child? When they've done something that has upset you or disappointed you, In that moment, they've upset you, but I think one must realize and never forget that the child is yours and you love them no matter what, right? So here, the importance of dealing with it with love. Great. When you may feel frustrated and defeated as a parent, but you would not want to reflect that in your approach. This is really important, that there are times when a parent might feel like, okay, I'm a loser, right? Everything I'm trying, it's not having an effect on my child, right? And I'm not seeing the results. Okay, however, and then we can say, okay, now because of that, I therefore no longer love my child because I feel like I'm a failure, right? This is where, it's really important to have like a broader perspective that, again, we're not the ones who are really the gardener here. We're preparing the grounds, we're doing our part. Allah is the one who is the murabbi. Allah is the one who's the Rabb. So sometimes our efforts might not see their fruits right away, and there are other factors that are there. We have to do our responsibility, and we should feel success in making sure we're doing our responsibility, not in the results. Okay, and definitely, like, this is not a time to lessen our love for our child when we're not seeing the results, because doing so might actually result in the opposite. Okay, when they don't recognize the kind of sacrifices you have to make in order to keep them happy. Okay, that was really interesting, that sometimes we'll feel like, oh my God, we've done so much, and this person's not appreciating, they're not saying thank you to me. Instead, they're I don't know, throwing the food that I baked them or something like that. Okay. Yeah. Okay, when have you seen that love can be deceiving to a parent, leading them to go to the excess? So compensating for the lost quality time with their child by going on a shopping spree. Retail therapy is actually deceiving to the child and the parent as well. That was a really nice word there, retail therapy. I liked it, Any comments about that? Any thoughts about this retail therapy approach? Do you see this? Yeah, I mean, absolutely, right? It comes up all the time. It's like, okay, well, we had a rough time. Okay, let's go splurge. Let's go out to eat. Let's go to this, shopping, this type of thing, right? Now, in and of itself, it might not be bad, right? Maybe there's a need, right? And now we have some time, and we know that let's say we know that our child has a certain need. They're excited about it, but that being like the thing, like that's my solution. My solution is I'm just gonna, give them more, right? We've talked about this. This is not something that's going to fulfill like that fundamental need that they have, which is of love. Okay, parents who deny that their child did something, even when there is evidence for it. Okay, that's a way of love being deceiving. That mother-cub type of, the mother and lion and the cub approach where like, my child will never do wrong, right? That overprotectiveness to that point, where we're blind to like, these type of things. Yes? Is that? Which one? This one? Oh, is retail therapy really love?
Yes.
Right.
It's a gift. You write them a gift.
Okay. So perhaps in moderation. In moderation, it could be, right? I mean, maybe that's their intention. But then if they're thinking about it deeply, okay, so what am I trying to fulfill here, right? What is it that my child really needs? Do they need this or do they need? So yeah. Okay. Excessive rewards for actions that should be an expectation. Asking the young girl to decide herself when she wants to start with, for example, with hijab and not at the age of bulugh. So this was really interesting. Like that, okay, out of love for my child, I'm hands off, right? It's like pretty much like it's up to you. You can decide when you want to pray. You can decide when you want to eat, right? I'm not going to have like fixed meal times. And then when it comes to something like, let's say, the hijab, okay, you can decide when you want to start. Right, like, and this is where like that permissive parenting approach, right? That's not something which, that's not the only way of, meaning, let me put it this way. When somebody has love towards their child, it doesn't mean that they have to move towards permissiveness. You can have love and you can also have expectations. We're going to get to that soon, inshallah. Okay, feeling apologetic to their child for their own shortcomings, and so they make allowances on the Islamic level. We've seen that where, a parent is like really like, they feel sorry for not spending time with their child, whatever. So then they're like, okay, what does my child really want to do? They want to break the rules. I'm going to help them break the rules. And it's like, this is a little spurging. You get to do this, and this is my special favor to you, right? Okay, well, what's our answer going to be on the Day of Judgment for that? Okay, and then one of the students said this. One old roommate of mine said he left his home due to his parents being helicopter parents, which is, very, very interesting, because we're talking about this, that in excessive love, it can be one that prevents the child from being able to like have independence, make their own decisions, really exercise their own will, which will backfire. Eventually, it will lead to the child rebelling. Yes. صدای قشنگ شما بشنوی.
Could you please explain what does it mean to be a helicopter parent? Because I'm thinking of a helicopter, and then
The helicopter hovers, and it keeps on hovering and hovering, and it just doesn't go away. You know, like sometimes in the middle of the night, that police helicopter comes, the San Jose police, and it's like it just doesn't leave. You know, it just keeps on going back. It comes again and again and again. And you're like,
oh, I see. So they keep going over that child. They kind of keep basting it.
And then they don't. It goes to this extent where, when the parent is too careful with the child, that child doesn't enjoy being a child. Like getting dirty, they don't let them get dirty, right? They don't let them hang out with friends. They don't let them to play in the kitchen, right? Nothing, right? That makes the child weak when he or she grows up and has to be on their own and make their own choices. Also, it greatly damages the child's creativity and decision making. Confinement of life these days, being indoors most of the time or outdoors, but in a structured playtime, doesn't expose them to the wonders of creation, life, and potentials. That was really insightful. One of the parents is saying that even this play structures that they have, like these kind of plastic, very like, it's sort of like a template approach to like playgrounds, right? Who said that play has to be in the form of like 3 slides, 2 whatever jungle gyms or whatever, and these like, you should, like Allah created like so much more than that, right? But sometimes it's just so convenient, like we can put them there, they're gonna be, whereas like taking them to like a rugged field or like a walk in the marsh. By the way, it's very interesting. So there are nature walks that are offered by like the I think the library or by like the cities, and here in California, like where you can learn about wildflowers, you can learn about like birds, different like features of the terrain, and especially in the summertime, because I know that like a lot of children are they have time available, and so different times during the week they have these things. Anybody know what's offering? Is it the libraries or is it the cities? Anybody? Is it libraries? Okay, it is the libraries. Yeah. So for those of you who are here in the Bay Area, you're interested in it, you could check it out and let us know how it goes. Maybe we could go as a group. Okay. All right. Any comments on these before we move to the lesson for today? Yes.
Can you discuss some of the sports that? So, can you discuss some of the sports that the Ehlobet encourage in instilling in our children? I've heard archery, horseback riding. That's highly recommended for our children to learn. Swimming. Yeah. I've heard that.
Sure. The sports that the Ahlul Bayt encouraged our children to learn, one of them was archery, right? We have swimming as well, horseback riding. Okay, but no, these sports in and of themselves, it's good, useful. Swimming, is one of those sports which is highly, like, it engages all parts of the body. Why did the Ahlul Bayt encourage those, right? One of the reasons is because, these are things which especially are good for like warfare, right? Like, I mean, if you know how to fire a bow, like, maybe the swimming is something which also, it's because of the fitness quality of it, maybe because of the health benefits, I'm not sure. Horse riding, because of the, it's a art of warfare, right? These are things which are useful. So in today's world, what should we do? What sports should we do with our children? This is where, definitely something like swimming. I mean, a child needs to learn how to swim, right? And if they don't learn when they're young, it's a lot harder to learn when they're older. But of course, you have to keep in mind, in terms of like having an appropriate environment, decent environment for them to be able to do it better when they're younger. One thing I should say here is that it's good here to also observe our child's nature and to see what is it that would make them attracted to the sport without pushing them away. So I'll give you an example. Recently I was speaking to a mother who had 2 children. One of them is very like outgoing, really into like team sports, and really enjoyed, like, for example, playing soccer or football or basketball. The other child, he was more withdrawn, and felt uncomfortable in that. And so she was wondering, okay, should she push him or not push him for that, right? So we were talking about, like, you know, that sometimes there might be a child who is more inclined towards like individual sort of sports, right? Even like racket sports, so there's no like physical contact, right? Which is okay, right? It's okay to, like, you know, let's say that, you know, we have that option as well. It's good for them to be all-rounders, but maybe if you want to like specialize in a sport, it doesn't have to always be the same sport. You know, I know that, for example, a lot of fathers would like their sons to follow in their legacy. Like, oh, I was in the high school football team, and my child to be in the high school football team as well. But sometimes we have to see, okay, what is the child really like inclined towards, and go off of that. And then, of course, like when it comes to, you know, we live in a certain society where there's limitations and restrictions. So if we get our child like really into a sport when they're young, and then they get older, and they don't find a way to be able to do that sport in a halal way, then that becomes a type of restriction for them. So it's better to think ahead, you know, and plan ahead for that. And this is one of the areas where, like, sometimes it's frustrating for parents, you know, because it's like we know that it gets to a certain point where you can't do it without violating one of our Islamic guidelines. Okay. All right. So in our last class, we talked about some of the ways of demonstrating love, the importance of looking with love, the importance of physical affection, and good speech and manners. We said that physical affection is necessary but not sufficient. In addition to that, we need good communication. We need to look at how we call to them, how we talk to them, the word choice, and the tone of voice. Every single conversation matters. Use every incident that occurs, even if it's negative, as a positive opportunity to artfully get closer to your child, right? To show that love. Even at times of tense moments, it's an opportunity. And then the importance of connection before correction, which was highlighted by this one hadith, which is really beautiful. For someone who has good akhlaq, those who love him will increase, and the hearts will develop a comforting relationship with him. Right? So that good akhlaq is the means of providing that sukoon, to go back to something that we've been emphasizing in the past. So today we're going to be covering some other ways of demonstrating love. So we didn't get to this point, the effects of being ill-mannered. There's a point I want to make about that. Humility, truthfulness, gift giving, and a few other ways. And then we're going to look at some practical scenarios just like we did last time. Okay, so avoiding being ill-mannered. I'm going to say this right now, that, like, you know, when we talk about these concepts and we look at them, we're like, yeah, this is so obvious, right? If I'm an ill-mannered person in my family, then it's going to have an effect on my children. In practice, you know, when just through experience, in speaking with people who are saying that we're having problems in our marriages, problems with our children, right, in our communities, this is one of the main issues, right? It's just, and I don't get it. Like, I mean, I guess I get it. We get it because we all have this thing, but it's just like, it's so simple, but yet it leads to so many problems, yet we're plagued with it, right? Avoiding being ill-mannered, right? Having a constant hold of ourselves so that we can have the best of akhlaq at home. Maybe it has to do with, like, you know, the idea of, like, you know, this sort of false notion that when I'm at home, I can be relaxed. I can let go of my aql. I can just act according to my passion and desire, right? Maybe it's just this false notion. But when we start to see our home as a place where we have a responsibility there, right? We actually have to work towards providing this environment of sukoon, then maybe we can be more watchful over ourselves. So look at these hadith. You know, we didn't talk about this one in too much detail last time. Having good akhlaq establishes a firm foundation for a relationship based on deep love. Right? In our relationships, we want it to be firmly founded. Right? Why? Because when you build a castle on sand, right, the castle is going to be swept away with the smallest of storms. When you have a deeply rooted relationship, right, later on, there are going to be things that come up, right? Our children are not always going to be, you know, willing to just jump into our arms and hug us and kiss us, right? They're going to get older. They're going to develop their own sort of ways and tendencies, right? What is it that's going to keep them with us at that time? It's going to be that firm foundation. And that comes from having good akhlaq, right? It's troublesome sometimes when we, for example, some of the students, right, they, in their reflections, like they say that, we love our parents, but we wish they wouldn't get angry at us so much, right? That's something which, it's hurtful to see that a child is so affected by this when the parents get angry at them excessively, right? Or when their parents have bad akhlaq at home, with each other, for example. This one we talked about. Okay, look at these hadith. Like Imam Islam says it plain and straight. The family of someone who is ill-mannered will become tired of him, right? For someone who is ill-mannered, his companions and friends will turn into his enemies. So we're supposed to be attracting our family members, creating a bond of love and familiarity, but that's going to turn against us, and these people will eventually turn into our enemies. So the result of being ill-mannered with children is, number one, parents will not be able to influence their children because they don't have a connection. If you don't have that connection, then you can't influence them. Second is that children will not enjoy the parent-child relationship. Why? Because we said here that they'll turn into his enemies, right? So the children will not enjoy the parent-child relationship, and they will be seeking to leave it. That's why you see sometimes, like, 11th grade, the child rebels, or 12th grade, or when they go to university, the child rebels. Children may turn into enemies of their parents. Okay? I think we covered this one. Okay. All right, so now, the second, so after, if we go back to this ways of showing love, so we said that there is effective being ill-mannered. Now we're going to talk about humility, truthfulness, and gift-giving. So humility involves examining how we view ourselves with respect to our children. Okay, let's ask ourselves this question before we go on. That when I talk to my children, when I interact with them, right, they're smaller than me typically when they're younger, right? One day they'll be taller. Okay, they're smaller, they're younger, right? They can't think as quick or as clearly as I can, right? They can't articulate themselves typically when they're younger as well as I can. How do we view ourselves? Do we view ourselves as better than our children? Do we view ourselves as equal in terms of value? Or do we view ourselves as in a way that we see our children as better than us? Which one should we view ourselves? What do you guys think? Of those three, how should we view our children? Should we view it in a way that we're better than them, that we're equals, or that they're better than us? What do you think? Equal? At least equal. Sorry? At least equal. Okay. So we have answers ranging in the students who have gathered here in the class, ranging from at least equal to them being better than, they're being better than us. Okay, but on a typical interaction with our children, consciously do we bring this to our mind? I think that maybe if we start to look at it, a lot of times this is definitely not in our mind, right? Especially when our children mess up, right? Now, if we look at the traditions of the Ahlul Bayt, Imam Ali says that the fruit of humility, or the word here is tawadu'. Tawadu' means to put yourself in your proper place. The fruit of humility is love. So if you want to have a bond of love with somebody, that comes from humility. Okay? Hifz says that, Imam Sadiq said that whoever believes that he is better than others is among the mustakbirin. Mustakbirin is an adjective used, to describe shaitan and like the devils, right? I asked him if he sees a sinner and because of his lack of sin, then what? Like, let's say somebody is a believer and then they see a sinner who's sinning, can't they then say they're better? Then he says, no, far from it, hayhat. How often it's the case that the sinner will be forgiven, but you will be taken into account for your deeds. Have you not heard the story of Pharaoh's magicians? They were kuffar, and enemy number one of the Prophet, and they went up against him, right, in front of the whole public, and then, within a span of like a few minutes, they became shuhada, right? They flipped, they became shuhada, and their sins were forgiven. So Definitely not. Like, you can't do that. So when it comes to our children, how should we look at them? Imam Rida alayhi salam says the intellect of a Muslim does not become complete until he possesses 10 characteristics. He does not see anyone but that he says he is better than me and more God-wary. Okay? So tawadu' is to see oneself the way one really is, completely dependent on another for all traits, knowledge, possessions, good deeds, and therefore not better than others. Right? This is something which comes from our faith. If I have anything, it's not myself. It's Allah. Right? So it's not me. So how can I see myself as better than others? Islam teaches us to view others as better than us, including our children. Having tawadu, interacting with our children, means that we see them as better than us, and that creates love. Because when somebody knows, they see that this person's treating them in that way, it strengthens the love between them and that person. Now, here's the question: that doesn't humility lead to being taken advantage of? Right? If somebody acts humble in front of somebody else, right, doesn't that mean that person can come and just walk all over them? So the children will come and walk all over the parent? What do you guys think?
If that becomes a culture, how's that possible? So if they see this as a common nature common practice within the family, it's very unlikely to find it this way.
Okay.
But maybe at the beginning they might actually play it, that way that you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
But slowly they realize it's a value.
Okay.
I think he didn't answer the question, so I'm going to answer.
He answered.
It doesn't necessarily happen, if it's done properly.
If it's done properly.
If it's done properly, it would not.
It wouldn't happen. Okay.
Turn into abuse.
Okay. Can you pass the microphone this way? Brother Mehdi, right there. Sister.
I think just like with anything, there's boundaries. So we can have humility, but we should be able to recognize when we should have boundaries. When we see that things are maybe going in a negative direction, we should be able to stop whatever it is that is happening, if whatever hurtful behavior that is happening.
Okay.
Humility doesn't mean lack of wisdom or knowledge. Being humble will invite others to better actions.
From Sister Sakina online.
Okay. Thank you. Excellent. I'll share with you guys something. So just a few days ago, there was a young man who came to me, and he said that a lot of people in his generation, right, they become kind of very distant from their fathers, right? Why? Because those fathers, the approach they took towards raising their children was one of very authoritarian, very strict, okay, you have to fall into line, you have to do things this way, it's my way or the highway, that type of approach. And they weren't able to, in any way establish a heart-to-heart bond. And he was saying that what's wrong here? We just don't feel close to our fathers, right? And he was really, you could tell, he was really upset by this. That father demonstrating humility or humbleness in front of the child, no way, right? It would be no, I'm the one who's really, I'm superior type of thing, right? So, you could, sometimes when you talk to the children, you see how, what is the opposite? What is the alternative? Is it to really be hey, I'm the one who is really going to call the shot? I mean, that's not going to really result in the desirable, in what's desirable. So if we start to break this down, we know first of all is that when we do what we have to do for the sake of Allah, Allah gives us izzah in the eyes of people. Right? See, these are all Islamic principles, right? You're not going to find this in a book written by a secular author, right? How can being humble lead to my being dignified? Well, that's in the hands of Allah. Innal izzata lillahi wa lirrasuli wa lilmu'minin. Right? Allah gives that izzah, right? So izzah meaning dignity, izzah meaning being having a sense of like nobleness and dignity in the eyes of others, right? So Allah will give that, number one. Number two is that if we look at and say, well, how are we going to gain authority over our children? How are we going to get them to actually follow our lead? Approach number one is being warm, nurturing, and loving. It involves respecting the dignity of others. It involves acknowledging that this person, at least in my heart, I should realize that this person is better than me, right? They're a child, they're ma'asum, right? If they haven't reached the age of bulugh, even if they reach the age of bulugh, okay, well, they're young, right? Their heart is, can change a lot easier than, let's say, my old heart, right? So I should be looking at them from that perspective. The other alternative is that I'm harsh and authoritarian. I use the technique of yelling, hitting, giving threats, and sometimes following through with them, frequent cold shoulder. If you don't do this, I'm going to take away this. I'm going to take away your allowance. I'm going to take away your, like your privileges. You won't be able to eat food, right? You won't be able to do this. Now, sometimes we talked about this, right, in the very first class, that sometimes showing the cold, there's not cold shoulder, there was a better word for it, where you're, silent treatment. I meant silent treatment. Okay, sometimes using silent treatment and maybe depriving privileges as a temporary technique is okay, but not as the primary way of getting somebody to conform to certain things. Why? Because when we do that, number one, it only works when that child is like a child, right? As soon as they get into the third stage of development, around the age of 14, that's it. It's over with. Maybe even before that a little bit, right? It's not gonna have any effect, right? Like, what are you gonna do, right? I mean, they're smart enough to realize that, there's not that much you can do, right? Like, you're threatening them right now. What happens when they're taller than you, right? Then what? Okay, right? I mean, again, another brother was just saying recently that, like, he grew up in a household where his father always shouted at him and his mother, right? And he says that now that the father is older, right, he's like, okay, well, he doesn't shout as much, right? And if he does shout, I just give him the look because I'm bigger than him now, right? I mean, that's not the type of home we want to live in, right? Where it's like, it's through size, that's how we, establish like akhlaq in our home, right? So first of all, if we do that, it's only going to work in the short term. Second of all, it only works when that parent is with the child. The minute that child feels like the parent's not watching over them, okay, they're not. What hold does that parent have over that child? And that's why we see in those households where parents take an approach which is strict but not loving, but they're very religious, right? But sometimes from the same homes you have children who are just like going wild, right? They have their Instagram account that everyone knows about, and then they have the other one that they created. They have a TikTok account that they've created that no one else knows about, and where they're posting pictures of this and again, we're talking about anecdotes upon anecdotes, real things that we're hearing from the community. That's what happens, right? Now, does that mean that when we're showing love, we can't have expectations? No, right? It's not something which it's one or the other. So showing love, being authoritative as a parent does not mean that you have to be, okay, being authoritative does not mean that what I meant to say this is, okay, forget about that. Okay, that was too mathematical there. When you're showing love and humility, right, it doesn't mean that you have to be permissive at the same time, right? You can still have expectations. You can still very clearly state these expectations, hold them to high expectations. But when they don't meet those expectations, the approach is to deal with it with love. Okay? All right, any comments or questions about this? Yes.
Sister Sakina commented, I like to call this the differences between commanding versus demanding respect. When one has dignity, they command respect, but when one is undignified, they feel the need to demand respect.
Okay, excellent. So commanding respect versus demanding respect. Thank you. Okay. Any other comments?
I think when you want to set rules, you have to have gone over the rules with your spouse, so that when you're actually setting the rules on the spot, the spouse doesn't disagree with it, because then it confuses the child, right? So making sure that, you're kind of in tune.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, setting rules on the spot. If that means like, okay, in the heat of the moment when I'm upset at something, now I'm gonna that usually doesn't, lead to the best results, right? Like if you don't do this, I'm gonna take away this. That doesn't really work, right? It's much better to let things calm down, and then have like a rational conversation. Sometimes you involve the child in determining the consequences, right? And you say, okay, assuming that they're at the age where they can do that. Okay. All right, truthfulness. Okay, so again, this is another principle we have. When somebody is truthful, that is a way of securing the love of the person they're dealing with. Okay, fudging the truth, even if it is for good intentions, white lies, it does not bode well in terms of having a good, solid relationship built on love and trust with the people we're dealing with. A truthful person acquires three things through his truthfulness: reliability, love, and respect/authority. Which is, as a parent, that's what you want, right? You want to be seen as reliable with your kids. You want to be seen as an entity of love, and you want to have that respect. Love your children, be kind to them, and when you make a promise to them, fulfill it. Right? In the fiqh of of Islam, when the jurists speak about lying, they always also talk about breaking promises, and there's always this sort of these rules around: is it okay to break a promise? And some of the marjas say that if you make a promise with the intention to break it, that's an example of lying. So it goes along hand in hand, like that. When we're truthful, then we also are careful about what we promise to our children. So lying sours the emotional bond between two people, right? Children pick up on this, whether it be a parent or a teacher figure. If they promise something, but they don't fulfill it, the child picks up on it very easily. And it's very interesting. So parental lying influences child lying as well. Children learn it from the parents. Truthfulness includes fulfilling promises. So, there's a lot about this. Just one study, for example, where they did a study. Of course, they're just, these are just sort of, they're not like be all and end all of truth, right? But it's interesting that these researchers, they said that when adults lie to their children, they may be implicitly teaching their children to lie. Okay, even when children do not consciously recognize parents' statements as lies when they hear them, it is possible that they might recognize them later, or that they might begin to develop a general sense that their parents cannot be relied upon. Thus, it is possible that through modeling, children learn to lie to parents who lie to them, and that parenting by lying in particular may be associated with more pervasive and long-term outcomes later in life. What do you recognize from this paragraph? What's from the hadith of Imam alayhi salam? The one we just saw. What did they discover? That lying leads to what? Reliability, right? Which is super interesting, right? That Imam alayhi salam is saying that, look, when you lie, you become less reliable. This is what they discovered in their own things, right? And also that lying leads to more lying, right? It teaches somebody how to lie. So I just thought that was kind of interesting. I want to share with you guys. Okay, and the last one is gift giving. That giving gifts brings about love, preserves kinship, and removes enmity. Give gifts to one another in order to love one another. Doesn't gift giving spoil a child, right? Because now, we're in an age of materialism, so whenever we give our children gifts, then isn't it like teaching them that, okay, that acquiring something is, negative, right? So this is where, sure, it does, and it can be, and we know, again, to share with you, recently I spoke with somebody who was saying that, okay, well, this person, they grew up, where their parents would just, give them anything they wanted at all times, right? To the point where now it's causing problems when they're adults, because when you live like that, you have to live a very lavish lifestyle, and that can, really cause a tension when it comes to building a family. So it can be if it's the only way that love is shown, right? But if love is shown through a variety of different ways, then this becomes one of the ways, right? And it's not the crutch, right? It's one of the techniques that used. Also, gifts can mean much more when accompanied with meaningful written words, right? So, when, for example, a parent would give a gift if they write something as well, right? One of the students actually who, in their homework assignment, they said this, that sometimes they write a note for their child, and they put it in the lunchbox. So when they open up their lunch, they see the note from the parent. That was beautiful, right? Imagine now this child is seeing these words of love right there. It doesn't have to be long, right? But it can be very powerful. And the material value is not as important as the gesture, meaning that it's not always about getting like the latest and greatest. And children are like that. They get fascinated even with something small when they know that it came with love, right? We've seen this time and time again. And the material value is not as important as being tasteful. Sometimes, there's some people who are very good at giving gifts, right? And what they do is they know what to buy, even though it's not very expensive. When the person gets it, they're like, hey, this person thought about me enough that they knew that this is what I needed, right? So it's an art. It takes like practice, and there are people who are much better at it than maybe others naturally, but it's something that we can all strive towards. And sometimes being spontaneous is appreciated. In our culture, it's always like, oh, it's expectations. When it's my birthday, I get a gift. On Eid, I get a gift or something. Well, sure, on Eid al-Ghadir, for example, it's actually mustahab. It's recommended to give gifts and whatnot, but sometimes just doing it on a spontaneous thing can really improve the relationship. Okay, so there are other ways as well which, these topics of playing with the child and then giving them freedom, especially in the first 7 years, these are ways of demonstrating love. These are things that require like their own, sessions. Like we need a whole like class on these topics. So I just wanted to mention them right now, that these are also ways that are mentioned even in like the traditions of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. Okay, let's do a couple case studies and then inshallah we'll end up. So the way I wanted to do this is this, rather than, if you guys could just jot it down like right now or on your phone or on your notes, like what's your response to these case studies? So I want you to clean up your room right now. Okay, like what is, in terms of like everything that we talked about, like love, ways of showing love, dignity, respect, sukoon, having that bond, firm foundation, good akhlaq, everything we're talking about, right? How would you analyze this particular statement? Okay, so just jot it down mentally or write it down in terms of like, what's your analysis of this? I'm gonna do maybe, I don't understand, but inshallah maybe a couple more after this too. Okay, let's move to the next one. Will you two stop screaming already? You're making me sick. I'm going to get a heart attack. It's funny, sometimes, we, as parents, we might use these things and we think about where did we hear this from? And it's like, our parents used to use it on us, right? And we use it, and then it's like this generation thing. Okay, will you two stop screaming already? All right, and then, okay, you have a test tomorrow and you forgot your book at school. Good job, now what? Okay, and then the last one is this one. I was attempting to get my 4-year-old daughter out of the bathtub. I told her that sitting back down was going to make the germs she just washed off think she really liked them and would cause them to jump back on. Please don't take this as advice, right? Like, this is not the way to deal with a 4-year-old, but okay, let's go back to case study 4. So I want to clean up your room right now. Let me just hear from one or two of you on this one. What did you jot down for your notes? Yes?
So what I said was, it depends on the tone of voice that the parent is using and the situation like that they're in, because they might have been like asking them, okay, you know, their room might be dirty, so it's like time to clean your room. But it all depends on like how they're asking. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're being like angry or upset.
Okay. All right, so it depends on the context. Okay, anybody else? One other person let's hear from?
To me, it sounded like more of what the parent wants. So I want you to clean your room right now versus we need to clean the room, or other choice of words that could have helped create collaboration versus, you know, direct order.
Okay. All right, thank you. So, I want right now, so this is, I mean, you know, there's different angles, right? But this is what we came up with here, that I want, meaning what I'm busy doing right now is not important to me. That like, what is the child doing right now? Why are they not cleaning the room? Right? Maybe they had a bad day in school. Maybe they got bullied. Right? Maybe they're hungry. Right? So why are they not? We should figure that out, right? And if we're not, then what the child is busy doing right now is not important to the parent, meaning that the child's might think that I'm not important to the parent. Okay, I want right now, you're not my friend. You're trying to be an army surgeon. Right? Like it's like the drill sergeant. I don't feel a compassionate bond with you. I might even dislike you. And then what might happen is when the parent says, I want right now, depending on the child's like temperament, they might be like, well, try and make me. Right? It just creates like that belligerence in them. Like, oh yeah, all right, okay, well, let's see now. Let's see who's the boss here, right? Okay. So, are there other ways of phrasing it? For sure, right? But maybe because of the time we won't talk about that. So, here, okay. Am I spending most of my time telling my child what to do instead of just being with them? Can I give them a choice of when to do it in order to preserve their dignity? Can I give information instead of telling my child what to do? Okay, so your room is dirty. Okay, your room is dirty, right? Why am I saying I want you to, like, oh, your room is dirty? All right, when will you be cleaning it? Yes.
Isn't it a little too extreme? So what if you asked them before and they haven't done it, and then you just remind them you want to just
So can you restate the question just for the people online? Yeah.
Isn't it a little bit too extreme? Maybe they've asked before, and then right now they're kind of frustrated for the fact that they haven't really done the job, and then.
Right. Okay, but sure. But why say right now though? Like in a way, it is kind of like.
Because they are frustrated.
So why are they frustrated?
Because they haven't done their.
No, but okay, so let's say the room is dirty, right? Is it like somehow gonna like, I'm losing my life or something? I mean, it's like I'm not bleeding,
I mean,
right?
On
like,
the other hand, like, isn't it a
room's
little
dirty.
too much to just like, I want to clean the room right now, so.
Okay,
It's
maybe.
not that bad.
So maybe to go to Sister Alia's point, then maybe it just really depends on like the context, right?
Right.
But just from the wording of it, it does seem a little bit like kind of like, where's the love? Okay, let's put that. So if you can find the love in that, if maybe in because everyone has their own thing, right, and their own family dynamics, and sometimes like you have that type of bond where when you speak like that, the child knows that you love them, right, and they're saying, oh, okay, now it's okay, we're gonna do it right now, right? Let's do it right now, and then you say with a smile, maybe.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, going off of that, like, maybe when you're saying that, like, you are saying it, you think you're saying it with love, but I think a parent's intention, like, doesn't necessarily translate to the child. Like, I can have an intention of love, like, to my little sister, but she's not necessarily gonna understand that. So my intention doesn't actually play out in real life. Like, it's about how they're gonna receive, like, how I'm acting towards them.
Right. That's a really good point. And as a parent, right, if I'm going to judge based on, okay, hey, it worked, they did it, right? Yay, success, right? That could be a mistake because I got them to do something, but maybe I used the wrong technique and in the future it's going to like backfire, right? Because I didn't respect their dignity, I didn't have that humility, I didn't have that love, right? Second thing that Sister Sarah points out is that sometimes we're well-intentioned and maybe we might joke, right? We might use sarcasm. We're well-intentioned. We think that our children will know that we're just joking or we're just using sarcasm. I want to really highlight this thing about sarcasm because sarcasm can be very hurtful, right? And our child doesn't show any reaction, but those things build up. And over time, and then one day it can come back, right? And so that's why we said from the beginning that the word choice is really important, right? Regardless of who you're talking to. At all times, like the prophets, the imams, the people who really follow their footsteps, at all times they have good word choice. Not just depending on who they're talking to. It's not relative, it's absolute thing. Thank you. Okay, let's go to this one. So let me hear from somebody else. So when it came to this one, what did you jot down? Anybody? Oh, we have Brother Salman.
So there's exaggeration, and that's going to lead you to lose your reliability. They might not think what you say means in the long run.
Okay, excellent. Anything else?
So you're saying the child may think I am a source of illness or disgust to you.
Okay, I'm a source of, I'm such a pariah to your existence that basically you see me, you have a heart attack. Like, it could be, right? It could lead to that again, where's the love? Okay? So, first of all, okay, you two, will you two stop screaming already? You're making me, you two, depending, it could be something which is a bit disrespectful. Children are not human enough for a parent to call them by their name, right? Potentially. I'm going to get a heart attack. Parents are more important to themselves than children are. Maybe, right? Heart attack. The child is being blamed for the parent's inability to control their emotions. Right? Why are you getting a heart attack, right? So the kids are being loud. Why are you getting, what's the big deal here, right? So, okay, so this loud decibel somehow, it's like the world is falling apart. What's the big deal, right? Sometimes parents are way overreacting or something. It's just not really a big deal. Okay. And okay, we're done with our time now. So what about last one here? You have a test tomorrow, and you forgot your book at school. Good job. Now what? Let me hear from one or two people on this one. What did you guys put? Anybody? Yes. Could we? Right here. MashaAllah. Thank you.
Like the child is not allowed to make mistakes.
Okay. Right. Perfection. Otherwise
expectations are
high expectations. Right. So, okay. What else? Yes, Australia.
Sorry. So one thing that I thought of was as a parent, you have responsibilities, and maybe you could have taken that extra mile because you care for your child and you want them to succeed. So the other sister said, you can't blame your child for a mistake that you could have prevented. And because if they're smaller, then what good is that going to do? That's going to make them hate school, oh, I don't want to study, I don't want to go to college. I feel like it could have a negative effect.
Right. Okay, excellent. So it's just pointing out the importance of the question is, why do you have to blame anybody, right? Is this the occasion of blame, right? Is this really necessary at this point? Okay.
And so when they're saying good job, there's a hint of sarcasm there.
Definitely, right? So sarcasm. Excellent. Yeah. Thank you. So again, you and you, it's like blaming, right? Why is sometimes we think we have to blame. Why are we blaming, right? Remember that incident from last time, the breaking the glass thing? It was why go and blame? Good job, sarcasm, it leads to humiliation, right? Rather than being humble, right? No, you're basically humiliating that person. Good job, it leads to loss of dignity that can lead to disastrous long-term consequences. We talked about this last time, that one of the most damaging things that a parent can do for a child is to have them lose their self-worth and their dignity, right? Because then pretty much it opens the door to everything. Imam al-Islam says, "Man karumat alayhi nafsuhu lam yuhinha bil ma'asiyah." Somebody who is dignified, they won't ruin themselves with sinfulness. Okay, now what? The parent is supposed to teach and model how one should react in crisis, right? If the parent's now what? Meaning the world has ended, right? That's not really teaching our children how to get out of this, right? It's not teaching them a positive way of approaching it. Okay, I think that we've gone a little bit, sorry for going a little bit over time. Alhamdulillah, we were able to cover some ground, and again, we don't have time for open question and answer, but if anybody would like to come up and ask individual questions, you're welcome to. وصلى الله على محمد وعلى آله الطاهرين.